Hello, non-binarians. We are now live and we're gonna hang for a second until folks join us. Hello, hello. And our featured speaker today, gonna give a sec to join. Oh, look at all the folks trickling in. Yay!
Hi,
Hi!
how you doing today?
Someone just asked in the comments, I'm going to answer their question. We're going to save this live afterwards. So yes, a recording will be available for rewatch.
That's a good question. It's something I should have asked before too. but I'm delighted for it to be recorded and reshared.
These are the things about live and the internet. We get to feel good and embarrassed afterwards when we watch ourselves and be like, oh God, I allow this to be seen.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. I just flew back from Miami of all places this morning.
This morning?
Yes, this morning. So if I fall asleep, just send someone to wake me up. No, but I say Miami of all places, but obviously there's a ton of book banning going on in Florida, but there's also a ton of activism. So I can maybe talk about that later, but it was really amazing. Yeah, so I'm okay. Just kind of remembering what it's like to be in Brooklyn.
Remembering, yeah. Are you doing anything right now to take care of yourself while you're also touring and having to talk about something that might be activating for you? I know it's what you do, but also to have to constantly repeat, like, it's hard out there, might also bring some stuff up for you.
Totally.
So how are you taking care of yourself?
Great question. I would like you to text me once a day to ask me.
That goes for everyone out there that's tuning in.
Yes. Honestly, just one of the ways I take care of myself just kind of walked up and headbutted my leg, which is my cat's. Just kind of grabbing a furry, wonderful creature and hanging on to him for a sec is really incredible. But also, as dispiriting as this work can be, when they get the jump on us and manage to ban books, especially when they manage to ban Black books and books by Indigenous people and people of color, and when they manage to ban queer books and trans books, every time they ban one of those books, someone pops up to try to do something about it. And meeting those people and talking to those people is incredible, truly.
I love to hear that. It sounds to me...
And bathrobes.
And bathrooms. I was about to say, it sounds like you're filled by the work, which I love to hear, but also pets are good. My dog is here for our Tandem talk today, too.
Oh, good. Well, I believe that you can. Okay, I was trying to grab Starbuck, but she was not having it because I know it's rude to mention a cat and then not show the cat.
Well, eventually, a cat will appear. So, Philomena, would you please introduce yourself for the viewers at home?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm Philomena Polefrone, she, her. I work for the American Booksellers Association, which is the national trade association for independent bookstores across the country. So representing over 2,500 locations. And I'm the point person for free expression advocacy, which in the year 2024 means fighting against book bans and especially fighting against bans of diverse books, not because, basically because those are the books that are being targeted disproportionately right now. So it ends up being kind of equal parts defense, pushing against book bans in any way we can, and offense, by which I mean just kind of trying to get as much literary diversity out there as possible in whatever way I can.
Just humble work.
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, it's not like I'm doing anything wild, like biking a bike around and giving away free books.
Listen, listen, what each of us is able to bring to the table. I mean, when we first met each other, for folks who do not know either of us, we had a little fan moment meeting for the first time because we recognized the work before like the person at a conference. So that's always, I think, part of like meeting the people. I'm sure you were talking about with being in Florida, being on tour, and just generally doing the work that you do. Like when you meet the people who are doing the cool things, it's like, oh my God, you're real. I could just see you and meet you and you're a person. I'm curious because I don't actually know how long the free expression arm has existed within ABA. I feel like it's very recent.
It's actually not.
It's not.
So let me tell you a tale, okay?
Please.
So the free expression arm of ABA is called American Booksellers for Free Expression, or ABFE. And that was actually started in 1990, which is the same year that I was born.
It was meant to be.
It's called Destiny. You can look that up in a book, unless it's banned. But so yeah, ABFE was started in 1990, and it was kind of in response to the previous moment of censorship, which was in the 80s. There was this group called the Moral Majority, which was kind of the Moms for Liberty of its day.
Sounds like it.
In fact, they have some of the same funders, which I go talk about in a book that I will talk about later.
Yes.
But yeah, so ABFE was one of several things that came out of that. And for a long time, it was an independent organization, a 501c3 called the American Booksellers Foundation for Free Expression, ABFE. So we dropped the F, but we dropped the first F. And it was subsumed into the American Booksellers Association, I believe in the aughts.
Okay.
Partially just as a way of restructuring, but it's actually a really, really useful partnership for kind of like coexistence, because I am able to reach out, so easily get in touch with booksellers. It's really clear in what sense I speak on their behalf and so forth.
So it's not new, but you are new-ish to your role. You've been in the role a year now? A little more than a year?
Over a year, yeah. Because Kay, I met you on my second day of work, because my second day of work I had taken a train to DC for the NABA-CIBA Booksellers Conference, NBNR. And you were extremely generous in telling that story earlier, because it was mostly me running up to you and saying, oh my God, you're the non-binary.
Okay, but then you were like, so this is the job that I have, and it's like, oh wow, this is like a meeting of the minds in a way where so many of the mutual aid groups and the organizers that I know and booksellers and publishing professionals, like the Venn diagram really overlaps the point of it being a circle, but hearing
Totally.
about this arm that I wasn't even aware of within the ABA's history, or independently, like you said, as the nonprofit, like what a cool thing to be like, oh, you're the person doing the thing. A lot of what I say, like generally about the non-binarian, is we're combating book bans by promoting representation. So it's kind of in that like offense way, as you said.
Yeah.
But I often say to folks, like, we're privileged to be in Brooklyn where we're not really being faced with that. And you referenced just having come from Florida. But something that always comes up in conversation, literally the other night at a bar, the bartender was like, but is it really happening right now? And it's like, yes, yes. So I feel like that's very much what I see you doing is really bringing to attention that this is a very present moment, that if folks are familiar with Banned Books Week, it is Banned Books Week, in which like the larger book world comes together to be like, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
These are the titles. This is what you can do. So I'd love to hear you talk about what it's like that you're in your role for what is your second Banned Books Week. You were very new in your role last year, this time last year. Banned Books Week is always the last week of September. But now that you've got like your sea legs a bit and you're on tour, what does this week, Banned Books Week, mean to you as an organizer and someone who is in this professional sense? And what does it look like from the outside too, as folks are
Yeah,
seeing like this proliferation of social media messaging, but might not know what it actually means?
yeah, there are a lot of good questions there. And I think, one, I've spent the last year seeing exactly how bad it is and how bad it actually could be, which is not
Mm,
anywhere close. And
okay.
I'm saying that recognizing at the same time that it is as bad now, if not worse, than it has ever been in the United States. It's not an exaggeration. Um, and the things that book banners are trying to do could make it so much worse and so much more general. So I'll flesh all of that out.
Yeah.
But to address like what a book ban actually is
Hmm.
and why people are saying that they don't exist, and the version of it that people usually say is like, well, the book's not banned if you can get it on Amazon. Like I've never heard that before. Um, Spoiler, I have. I
Spoiler.
um, so when they say that, what they're actually saying is there aren't books that are banned everywhere in the United States.
Hmm.
But when people say this book is banned, what they mean is this book is banned somewhere in the United
Hmm.
States. And that might be a school district, that might be a public library, and the shift from a school district to a public library is itself terrifying because that is a shift from the argument of, well, maybe this book isn't right for an elementary school to this book isn't right for anywhere that a minor could conceivably access it, right? So when we're talking about like a mechanism for how a book is banned, usually it happens because one parent or a group of parents, but it's really often just one. In I think 2023, 11 individuals were responsible for 60% of the book challenges in the US.
I believe it.
Um, I believe it was individuals or families, but
Yeah.
same, same difference. And that's from the Washington Post. If you want to check my sources, which you always should. And the reason that happens is because a lot of school districts have bad policies, and they won't say, actually, you can only try to ban a book if you actually have a kid in the school district, which to me is like a really common sense measure that every book challenge policy should have.
Yeah.
So, Mary and Jonathan in wherever can challenge books from in 4 states over on the other side of the country if they find a policy that isn't constructed right. So it's really important to understand what those policies are and what kinds of protections they have. So that's how it happens, is that someone will say, I think this book is inappropriate. I don't think it should be in this part of the school or library. I don't think it should be anywhere in the district. And they'll challenge it, and ideally, it goes through a review process that includes librarians and teachers and parents, maybe a bookseller, usually some school board members and an administrator. And they read the book in its entirety and they say, was this a mistake? Did the librarian maybe mistake with this with a different book, or just make the wrong call about what section it should be in or whatever?
Yeah.
And that's an important policy, right? Because
Yeah.
mistakes happen, and it's good that there's a mechanism for people to bring it to someone's attention. But what started happening in 2021, right around sort of like in the wake of the insurrection, and as all of these things started to, like all the kind of anti-mask protests started to emerge, those things are weirdly tied, actually. Right around that time, people started using those policies for ideological ends, and specifically to target books by, for, and about queer and trans people. especially kids' books, just trying to tell queer kids that it's okay to exist,
Yeah.
and targeting books that that book banners try to say are critical race theory or are pushing racial grievance. So that becomes this weird, terrible alchemy in which a book that is calling out racism is described as racist because it's talking about racism, or because, frankly, because it makes white people feel uncomfortable, then it is something that they want to ban. So that really is what is so distinct about this moment versus other moments. Is in many ways it's the repetition of the same. Some amazing Black booksellers who I was on a panel with last week, lost track of space and time, Sunday of last week. Hannah Oliver Depp from Loyalty in DC, and Raimonda Lark-Young from Mahogany Books put it really well. I think this was Raimonda's point, that Black books have always been banned. Goes back to bans on literacy for enslaved Black people. It goes back to bans on any kind of Black revolutionary text in the 19th century. And books by and about queer and trans people have always been banned, in the sense that if they could have been written and published in the first place, they would have caused an incredible outcry. So the content that is banned is not new, but they've been reframed in this particular way for this horrible moment that we're in.
Yeah.
And actually, I would say it's backlash to whatever measure of liberation there has been over the past few years. They're trying to roll that liberation back through books as a way of controlling who could appear in the public sphere, and then, if possible, push it even further back than that.
Right. I mean, when you say how the book banning moment is tied to the insurrection and anti-mask protesters, it makes a lot of sense, because you're thinking of that loud minority and who's getting platforms in this period of misinformation, and like the speed with which social media distributes the misinformation. I believe completely when you're talking about like who's been banned, that it's like always been that way. But within publishing, like, this is something as a bookseller that I often get to be like, we're in a really great moment for especially like queer literature for kids, of like, more than ever we're seeing the picture books, the board books, the graphic novels boom in YA. So like, more than ever, we're getting the visibility of the authors getting their work out there, which, thank you publishers for like doing that. And thank you bookstores for carrying these books, and for the readers proving that there is a demand for it. But it's just like the more representation of particularly trans visibility in popular media, in film and TV, in sports, as we've recently seen with the Olympics. This scrutiny that folks are under, then it doesn't surprise me at all that it's like the critical race theory, which no one can define, no one being the people who are like in an uproar about it. They think elementary school students are learning about critical race theory.
Can I jump in on this point for a second? Because before I was doing this, I was a professor of English and political philosophy. Okay, lecturer, but it was the same job, whatever.
Yes.
And they called me professor. It's fine. Not mad about it. Anyway, so I actually was teaching like the greatest hits of Western political philosophy, and every year I would end in the last month of the class with actually teaching critical race theory. And if a Columbia sophomore is having their brain broken by critical race theory, and first year law students are having their brains broken by critical race theory, kindergartners are not reading it.
Right.
I would love to be introduced to the kindergartner who's reading Kimberly Crenshaw. Like, baby genius, okay, fine. But that's not happening.
No.
So yeah, that one particularly drives me crazy.
Yeah, and it's really indicative of the ignorance and the scarcity mindset of many people in the country. Like we were talking about the loud minority before when it comes to the people perpetrating the challenges and bans, but like as we've been seeing in like our crumbling democracy in this country, like that is very loud and not necessarily the minority. Um, so I am sure lots of folks tuning in and in general who are being exposed to Banned Books Week in particular, or learning that it is a present moment, would be curious to know what they can do. But before we get to that, I do want to celebrate the fact that you just published a book.
Yeah.
You just published a book.
Yeah.
It just came out.
It did.
And that is tied to action steps for civilians as well as people who work in the industry. So please tell us about your new book.
Here
Yay!
it is.
It's real!
My baby. It's called the ABA Right to Read Handbook, Fighting Book Bans and Why It Matters. And it's really, both halves of that are important, fighting book bans and why it matters, because as I mentioned in the letter that I wrote to the non-binarian followers, like it feels kind of quaint, right, to talk about banned books, because surely this was a thing that happened in the past. Banned Books Week was something that I remember seeing at the library sometimes, or at the bookstore sometimes, but I was like, I don't know what that is, probably not important. It's really important, because as we've kind of alluded to here, I'm trying to explain in this book, in part, why the banning of books is part of the banning of people. Specifically by targeting the public sphere, by targeting what people and what ideas can circulate in public, in places that are supported and funded by taxpayer dollars. And so the book is a few different parts. It starts with the history, where I'm trying to take the moment that we've been in since 2021, like just trying to explain what the hell happened, because it's actually kind of dizzying.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's kind of hard to figure out how this little group in Broward County, Florida, Brevard County? There's too many counties.
The county. I believe you.
But this little group that starts in A County in Florida by disgraced former school board members who got chucked out of their job because no one liked them, how they started this group, Moms for Liberty, that kind of that ended up kind of creating this virus that spread across the country.
Yeah.
And it's not just them, but because there are a ton of other groups, there are a ton of individuals who maybe are acting in concert but are not coordinated in that way, don't have like a 501c4 and so forth, but who are using their materials. So one part is me just trying to explain how this happened.
Yeah.
And then the next part is to take that and put it in the context of other previous moments, some of which I've referenced already, the 19th century obscenity trials that go into the 20th century, McCarthyism, which actually starts to look pretty similar to what's going on now, especially when in Utah, very soon, books could literally be going on trial. And then in the 80s, this moral majority moment that I referred to before, which include such gems as I Love America rallies, where everyone is dressed like the Handmaid's Tale. I'm not kidding. There's the picture in the book. So to try to put it in that historical context, because this didn't come from nowhere, but the ways that it's different matter and the ways that it's similar matter. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of like deep history part. But awareness isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. Especially when there are very specific things that people can do in their communities that make a difference and can stop it piece by piece from happening. So a big chunk of the book is a series of how-tos really pragmatic step-by-step guides for how you can actually do something about it. And these are meant to meet people wherever they are.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just starting to hear people talk about it. Maybe they're just starting to hear rumors that something could happen. Then there are sort of talking points and how to address some of the really common myths. Like, I've heard that book bans are a hoax. Is it really happening? Like, there's talking points for that. Or the idea that there's pornography in schools, which again, there isn't, right? Often when they say pornography, what they mean is queer books.
Yeah.
So there's things like that, addressing the talking points. There's really like wonkish but important things, like how to find and understand your school district's request for reconsideration policy, which is how they handle a book challenge.
I was going to ask that because in my bookseller life, I get to see what the books are and talk about that with people, but I'm not necessarily engaged in like deeply local politics in the school district. And so it's like, when do I find out if it's not until the point that it has already escalated?
Yeah.
So I appreciate hearing that it gets that detail, because I feel like that would be a common question for civilians.
Yeah, and part of the thing that's hard about it, right, is that this is happening all over the place, and as a result, there are a lot of different state laws. There are even more different local and district level laws. So some of it is always going to be, you just have to figure out what your school district is, find the school board's documents and read them. Mm-hmm. But because the attack on school boards has become national, there are a lot of very specific trends in what they attack and the kinds of things that they try to do. So, for example, kicking librarians off of the review panels that decide whether books are banned or not. Making those as open as possible to any old person who wanders in or who has been driven there by some of the anti-book organizers. And things like that make that process less robust. So what I was trying to do is sort of figure out, how can I give people what they need to learn about what's going on in their own local situation, because I'm never going to be able to know in depth what is happening in every district in the United States.
Of course.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so part of, to the question of like, how am I going to know what's happening until it happens? That's one of the things that I really hope people will take from this book, is you have to learn now. Like, you have, even if nothing is happening, and especially when nothing is happening.
Right.
Because what happened in 2021 is no one was paying attention, because school boards, as they're supposed to be, are really boring, right? Right? I mean, it should be like, oh, the English teacher wants a raise.
Yeah.
Like, that's what should be going on there. But instead, they became these circuses. So you have to engage when it's boring, and you have to pay attention when it's boring, to stop it from becoming interesting in a way that you don't want it to.
Right. I'm curious if the fact that it's an election year means anything. Presently leading up to the election, if this moment feels any different on like the heels of, you're talking about 2021, and I immediately thought of the insurrection, but also like the election was a fraud, it was stolen, that like rhetoric we were hearing. And so thinking of it going from boring to interesting in a bad way, like I'm thinking of all the people who were bored and had nothing to do, using that anger and that like feeling of, I don't know, that perceived like helplessness of like, my president didn't win, that they then pivoted that anger, and that was their hobby, right? Whenever I think of people like Moms for Liberty, or people who stand outside of businesses that had mask policies to be loud about I'm like, please get a hobby, a different hobby.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what it feels like, is you have too much time on your hands, that you're going to the school board, right, and shouting there.
Like, why can't we live in the timeline where they all took up knitting? Like, that would be incredible. And I say that as a knitter.
I knew you were going to say that. as a knitter. You're like, I welcome these people as
Listen, it was
knitters.
incredible. Or fine, cross stitch, whatever. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Some kind of thread-based hobby, instead of trying to burn our democracy
Thread-based
down.
hobby.
Yeah, you know, textiles. That's the word I was looking for. Anyway, yeah, that would be. I think that was a big part of it. I think also one thing that I've heard over and over again is that when school came home during the beginning
Yes.
of the pandemic,
Right.
um, I'm quoting Dr. Emily Knox here, who is an incredible scholar of book bans and literary censorship in U.S. history, interviewed in the book, also just an incredible advocate and scholar. When she said, you know, I think a lot of people didn't realize how much pedagogy had changed for the better.
Yeah.
Since last they were in school. And there are a ton of incredible educators who are trying to make education more diverse and are trying to do all the work that so many people are trying to do in publishing and in book selling as well.
Yeah.
And you know, people didn't necessarily want that and wanted to control the kinds of information that people were getting at school, that when they actually realized, oh wait, hold on, this is a way more liberated place than I thought it was, that's when the clampdown starts, and that's when it starts to get pretty scary. But I think it's definitely both. I think it's boredom and malevolence combined.
So you have been on your book tour.
Yes.
And in these conversations, I want to give you the opportunity, because we're virtual and this will be saved for folks to view after our live. And you've been going to different regions and having different conversations, I'm sure, because you're able to get more specific to where you are in these conversations. Like you just said, you came from Florida this morning. I'd love to hear about what your tour experience so far has been like. And how like our virtual audience gets to have that little window into like what is going on in Florida and what was that conversation like. So I'd love for you to have the opportunity to speak so far on your tour and those conversations.
I'd love to. I mean, I'll start with the most recent. I was flown down to Florida by an incredible bookseller in Miami, Coral Gables specifically, Mitchell Kaplan, who runs Books and Books. Amazing bookseller, but also he saw what was happening in Miami-Dade County, which has banned a ton of books, enormous county, huge numbers of students impacted by it. Also an incredibly diverse place that, you know, I think that feeds into some of the tensions that lead to book banning when people are sort of, when a place is becoming more diverse and they kind of start to panic. So I was in Miami at, I believe it's the Coral Gables Congregational Church, which in talking to Mitch, declared itself a sanctuary for banned books and became one of the places where Mitch and a group that is now known as the Freedom, Freadom Coalition, which is a bunch of grassroots organizations serving different communities. They put on, as they did for the first time a few years ago, essentially a festival of banned books. It was yesterday it was this. I was a singer-songwriter, I think mostly like music for kids, Joni Leeds, who has an album, I think it won a Grammy, or she's won a Grammy for something else, about banned books. So it was this amazing thing where grassroots activists were coming up and reading excerpts from And Tango Makes Three, aka the Gay Penguin book, right? Book. And then singing a song about it. So that was incredible. I had a chance to meet like Families Against Banning Books and folks from the National Coalition Against Censorship and the Miami Freedom Project and so many more. And that really, you know, I go to celebrate, right? And this is actually true of Banned Books Week as well. It is a celebration of books that have been banned. But it's also a way to raise awareness and actually kind of organize the organizing to kind of coalesce as much as possible into everyone doing the same thing at the same time or having the same conversations at the same time or something like that. So that was Miami. And then actually one of the organizers of Families Against Banning Books gave me this tour of the Cuban neighborhood, Calle Ocho in Miami. That was like the greatest thing. So that was a nice break. But before that, it was in DC, where usually when I'm going on the tour, I'm trying to pair it with some kind of organizing opportunity, whether that's going to a regional bookselling conference and hearing what people are dealing with and trying to make the kinds of connections that help us work together going forward. Or in DC, it was the Free People Read Freely Summit that the American Library Association was putting on. Basically, everyone who is doing this work on like an institutional level, as well as a fair number of grassroots organizers, were there just comparing notes, figuring out how we can be more organized together. Yeah. And over the next few days, I'm doing a handful of virtual events like this, partially so that I can stay in one place for a little, and partially just so that we can get the message out to more people.
Right.
So next, I will have an event in our beloved Brooklyn. On Thursday, it's with Books Are Magic. I'll be moderating an incredible panel, and that will be at the Brooklyn Heights branch of the Brooklyn Public Library on Thursday the 26th at 6 p.m. I think. I hope I figure that out by Thursday.
I'm sure folks can find it on the Instagram.
I'm sure. And then on Saturday, I'll be in Portland for the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association conference. And on Saturday, I'll have a event at Powell's, which is renowned, enormous, incredible bookstore in Portland.
Yeah. Busy.
Sure. Busy.
I want to give a chance there's a question from one of the folks viewing right now that asks, are there any banned books about the queer ballroom scene? If there is, it would be really cool to put in my Banned Books Week research project for college.
Love that.
Very cool that you're doing a Banned Books Week research project in school. So yay that. And I turn that over to you, Mina.
A+ to you and A+ to the teacher who assigned it. Though probably this was you doing with the initiative there. It's a great question. I don't know about the ballroom scene in terms of going all the way back to like the origins of the ballroom scene. That I'm not aware of. I do know that there are a fair number of books by drag queens, because Drag Story Hour, if you don't know, is this really amazing organization that helps bookstores and libraries have story time, usually with diverse books that read by drag queens. And so some of them have written books, and the one that comes to mind is The Hips of the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish.
Yes.
And I was just looking at another one that had drag in the title, but I can't remember. But Kay, I feel like you might know this as well as I do. Unfortunately, if you can think of especially like a kids or YA book.
I was gonna say it's likeliest you'll find that information for the person who asked the question in the picture book range, because that's where like Drag Story Hour is in that story time reading level age.
Yeah.
And so on bookshop.org, we have lists that are curated for children, but many stores and bookshop.org in general, for folks who don't know, it's a great alternative to Amazon. It supports independent booksellers, and it's not going to be your instantaneous delivery, but it supports indies, and doesn't use an algorithm. It uses individual bookseller humans making lists. And so you're likely to find on there something that's been curated to include like up-to-date books. Um, I would also suggest you look up your local drag story hours. So like there's chapters. So like the Nonbinarian just did our first event with Drag Story Hour NYC. And so each chapter regionally likely has their own list of the books they are actively reading, want to source, because um, it's likely out of pocket for a lot of the performers that they're sourcing their books. You know, they don't have like a hub in a library. So something we were able to do the other day is we happened to have copies of some of these banned books. And it was really cute because then the kids attended the drag story hour and they had a little talk about it. And then they got to come to the bike and get that book for free. Yeah. So we had in Tango Makes Three, the Gay Penguin book. One of the books they read by Kyle Lukoff is When Aiden Became a Brother.
So good.
Yeah. And, you know, I think picture books are incredible, and they're always the first to go on the bike. And so, like, bless the parents who are getting those books for their kids, and the educators who are getting those books for their classrooms, because especially with educators, performers like Drag Story Hour, like they're doing that of their own volition for their own classrooms and collections and stuff. So I don't personally know. I know that's a very long-winded way of saying I don't personally know the extent of like ballroom. I don't know of, but there are some books. I don't know if they're being challenged, but there are some recent books about the history of ball culture. The Ricky Tucker book comes to mind, and the category is. I don't know if it's being subjected to bans and challenges, but because, you know, as Mina was saying, like it's impossible to keep track of like every local challenge. It might be something that you're able to search by like sourcing the titles and then looking like, are people talking about this book?
Yeah. Well, and what I can do, what's really helpful is to have the pen index of banned books.
Yeah.
They release every year. It's in a spreadsheet that you can filter by region, that you can search titles and things like that. So if you go to PEN America's website and search for the index of banned books, that's the best way to figure it out. And then you can also figure out like where it's banned, how many times it's been banned.
Yeah.
You just kind of see how many hits you get. So if you kind of do the cross-section of those two things, looking at people's collections on bookshop.org, just searching for keywords like drag and things like that.
Thank you to the folks. There have been some comments of people just thanking us for this conversation, thanking you, Mina, for this work, and for I just want to acknowledge and like how appreciate like it just I get like verklempt thinking of I do like I do at like the this is why we do the work, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot this week, where like I think about the difference that it actually could have made to me to have the literary scene, especially in kids' books and YA books that we have now.
Yeah.
Like, I remember like searching for books that could help me figure my stuff out. Like, it was a lot harder to find then. There were a lot fewer of them.
Oh yeah.
I think like probably everyone of a certain age like read a whole lot of David Sedaris.
Can I tell you, I in my collection, one of my first moments in like, I need to find a book, but it's a secret. But I went to the library, and like you were saying, like looking up where I was like bisexual,
Yeah.
like trying to find things, and I was struggling because there weren't a lot of titles. I was maybe like 20 something. I was in college, but it felt very private for me that I didn't want to ask a librarian. And I found this book called By Lives. It's published in 1999. So a little outdated from me in like 2009 looking for, but I still have it because it's like an anecdotal anthology, and so folks were able to offer like their personal perspectives of what living as a bisexual is like,
Yeah.
and it it was like getting to talk to people in like a support group. Like that's what it felt like, getting to be like, oh, there are other people like me, even if it felt like a little antiquated. Like it's definitely dated, it's definitely a product of its time, but I still have it because it's important to me. Oh my god, I just saw it is priced at $14.95. That might tell you how old it is, because books are not $14.95 anymore.
Yeah.
um
And it's like, well, two things. One, people are going to find the information that they need to survive.
yeah.
And if I were a parent, I would rather know that that information was good, was happening in the context of a book where there is a long history of curation and vetting of information and of the people giving that information, and making works as good as they can be. I would rather it be that than the rusty broken old Tumblr pages that we were on trying to figure everything out, right? Like that was not a good scene.
No.
And I think it's really, really important that kids be able to get this kind of information from trusted sources. And it's even more important that they're able to get it at all, because like, content warning, talking about some hard things here, so good time to maybe step out of the room for 30 seconds if you don't want to deal with that today. But the Trevor Project has a lot of really harrowing but important statistics about what happens, especially what happens in terms of suicidality among queer and trans students who don't feel accepted by their community, who don't feel accepted in their home, in their school. And having representation in the library can literally be a lifeline.
Yes.
And there are times when that would have made me safer.
Yeah.
There are times when that would have made a lot of the people that I love safer.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's enough. It's not, right? But it's this piece is so important as the kind of the battleground, because it's a piece that leads to so much more, right?
Oh yeah.
It's starting in primary schools, right? But before long, it was secondary schools. Before long, it was public libraries. Before long, it was colleges, at least in Florida. And now that's spreading to other places. So it's nothing less than, in terms of queer books, it's nothing less than the possibility of queer existence in public.
Absolutely.
That's
I'm gonna grab a book up here that I like try to put on display, and then I'm sitting on the floor. But many folks are probably familiar with genderqueer, which has been subject to the most, I think, has been the #1 banned and challenged book in the country since it came out. And like you were referencing earlier, it is that the loud minority are saying it's pornography, obscenities. For anyone who has not read this book before, highly recommend. And the Nonbinarian would be more than happy to donate copies to you. It's our book club book this month, and we did do a giveaway for it. And all the books that we have in our possession, copies that we have of genderqueer, were sponsored, donated to us by Oni Press, the publisher. So thank you, Oni Press. But the first time I read this book, and I had already found the language for myself, because this book is recent, even though like I'm a later in life queer. I cried at seeing like just the experience in picture, in word form, in an easily digestible form, and I think it's really brave of Maya, the author and graphic novelist, I got to meet Maya at Winter Institute, not this past one, the year before. Maya was on a panel with several other advocates about book bans. And I went up, like running up after with my little non-binarian merch and was like fanning out, and saw that Maya already had one of our pins on air, name tag lanyard. And it was like such a moment of like, this book is such a gift. And thinking, like you said, if I had access to this book when I was in high school, that would have spared me decades of pain.
Yeah.
And I feel so grateful that it is out there now. But thinking of, like you were saying, when books are pulled from the shelf, from the libraries, from schools, it, like, this book exists, but they might not know it exists. They might not be able to find it if they're
Yeah.
not seeing it. And so, you know, like I was saying of the Buy Lives book that I found, I was struggling to find things that I'm sure existed, but I didn't know how to find them. And I also didn't want to ask.
Yeah.
I was still dealing with a lot of internalized homophobia and shame. And so I didn't really know where to turn and wasn't going to ask. And so something that I love about working with the bike is like
K froze.
share.
Oh no, did I freeze or did K freeze? Oh, I'm back.
I think I froze. Sorry. Plenty of folks are very generous with sharing their stories, or the stories of others that they love. But there are plenty of folks also who come to the bike and engage like in like a private little moment. They don't have to talk to anyone, and they get to see something that speaks to them, and they get to take it, and they don't have to come out. They don't have to justify
No,
this. They don't have to
no.
worry about, you know, even if you don't ask a librarian for help when you take that book out for checkout, you know, that is vulnerable making. When you go to the cashier at a bookstore and you know that someone's going to see that, it's vulnerable making. If you're in a home that might not feel safe, you're young, you're a teenager where your parents are likely the people who are giving you money to buy books, and you feel like you can't ask them for money, you can't ask a bookseller to help you find the thing. It's really great to see that people can
Yeah.
just walk up and take the thing that speaks to them. So for anyone who does not live in Brooklyn and hasn't been able to visit the bike, you can DM us or email us and request a copy, because you deserve to see yourself in a book.
Kay, you're saying you're not doing a cross-country
Uh,
bike tour with a really heavy book bike?
you know what's so funny? Before the bike was an idea, this was like lockdown brain going really fast at like, bookstores are closed, libraries are closed, people don't want to like go far and like deal with people, and like, how are people getting books? I literally was like, what if I got a van and filled it with books, and I was like, do I do like the ice cream truck like sound to let people know? And it was something that I genuinely was like, maybe I do travel cross country. And then was like, yeah, that's not really sustainable. So it became a
Yeah.
bike.
No.
Um, I want to offer the opportunity for anyone who has tuned in later. If they have any questions, you can throw that in the chat. But we're about wrapping up here. So Mina, where can folks find your very newly published book? And show us again so people can see the cover.
Yes. So this is the ABA Right to Read Handbook, and you can find it at hopefully at your local independent bookstore. If you're in Brooklyn, I know it's in a few different places. The ones that come to mind: Taylor and Co. Books in Ditmas Park, Lofty Pigeon in Kensington, Windsor Terrace, Greenlight Bookstore. I've seen it all those places. But if you can't find it in your local indie, ask them about it. They can probably order it for you. Or, as Kay mentioned before, you can go to bookshop.org and search for the ABA Right to Read handbook, and it'll be there.
And you'll see Mina's author photo on the book. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, I was like, because for various reasons, it made a lot more sense to sort of have American Booksellers Association as the author. I'm also co-listed as an author, and they were like, well, you sure you don't want your name on the front? I'm like, no, Leo Moon, I just need my picture in the back. So there we go.
Yeah, so if you're not sure if it's the right book, but you did watch this today, you can be like, that's a face I know. Yeah. Mina, thank you so much for taking time in your very busy Banned Books week and tour and promoting the book. Is there anything that you would like to share, if folks can take away a little something about either how they can engage with Banned Books week, or if there's any parting words for the people?
Can I do like a little announcement on the DL to the?
Yes. Cannot. Yes.
So this has been in soft launch mode for a while, but this week we're going to be officially announcing something called the Set Books Free Project, which is a pipeline of banned and diverse books from independent bookstores to the places where they're most needed. A lot of bookstores already have book donation programs for banned books or for diverse books or just book access programs in general. The goal of the Set Books Free Project is to increase the number of those programs as much as possible. So see Be Yourself Bookshop is here. I think we were talking about it. Other folks have been reaching out and are interested in it. So the goal, the vision, the like ideal version of it is wherever a book is banned, we can just flood that place with banned books, right? It's not always, we're not going to probably get there, but we can get closer.
Mm-hmm. That's super cool. That's super cool. And little soft launch on the non-binarians, and also an answer to getting more of the books out there is we are expanding the book bike to have a bookstore. Yeah. Y'all are the first to know. And the book bike will continue its operations, and it means we'll have a year-round home to distribute free books in addition to being a retailer selling new and used, and it will be entirely queer inventory.
Yes.
So yay.
So proud to be witnessing it, and so proud that it's going to be in our beloved Brooklyn.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. And thank you, Mina. And I hope you get to put on your bathrobe and cuddle with your cat and turn your brain off for a little bit before flying cross country.
Surely I will do that. Not keep punishing myself.
Oh my God. Happy Banned Books Week, everyone. Celebrate as well as get some information on awareness, get the Right to Read handbook. And if you need help accessing either that book or genderqueer, any of the banned books, the Non-Binarian will do whatever it takes to get that book to you.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Okay, bye.